back again. So get right to it. Fred Bourgault, finish line. You all know the story. Couple notes before I start. First of all, if the video is too long for you and you're online, I don't care where it is, complaining about it, too bad. If you don't know how to use skip, fast forward, the slider, then don't watch. Because again, for the third day, not one person other than me was at this trial to witness this trial and document what's happening, where a horse was dead for no reason, and now a girl was being abused, and we were able to flush that out to where he's got to answer for that too. Nobody else was there but me. Nobody representing the people of harness racing, and nobody representing the governing or commissioning of harness racing. Basically, nobody cares. And that's why your sport's dying. I shouldn't say it that way. Let's say the industry is dying and dragging the sport with it. Whatever, separate matter. But it's just incredible. And I did see on a couple of people saying that the sickening thing about what, instead of trying to contribute something positive or helpful, saying that this is what happens to women, some like it. I mean, the barn trash, you people are sick. And that's why this is the reason that's all you're going to be able to do for the rest of your lives. Because in the real world, you could never make it. Anyway, I'm just going to read. It's very lengthy. You can always skip ahead. I will tell you that the most damaging testimony came from Randy Baxley. At the time, he was the head maintenance guy at Pine Bush Training Center, and he went right at the defense attorney. So the first two were Dr. Scott Palmer, DVM for New York State Gaming, and then Herman Schwarzenstruber himself, owner of Finish Line. So I'm just going to read through it this time as quickly as I can. Scott Palmer, New York State Gaming, went to Penn State, has been a licensed veterinarian since 1976. Cause of fracture, linear depression, top of the brain, caused caved-in skull, in a very linear way. Again, I'll just say it again. They're pushing the idea that whatever hit him was straight. It wasn't a horse. You'll see later. Again, never saw a fracture like that in all his years. Had to be linear and rigid. I've seen a lot of skull fractures, but never saw one with this architecture so straight and a half-inch wide. 2 to 3 inches long, very unusual. Skull was also compressed. Type of instrument to cause could be a twitch handle. He actually specified, said like a twitch handle. Not the round one, flat one. At least that's what I was able to try to deduct from all this. Consistent with the shape of the fracture. Hard to believe that anything else was caused by blunt force trauma, such as an excavator or a fall. Only a strike by a linear object. Compression fracture would have caused multiple fractures. Fracture location, most other fractures from the kick would be lower on the face. Multiple bone fractures, and would look more like the shape of a horseshoe. And then he goes on to say, with a shoe, more likely to cut the horse other than without a shoe, whatever. You get the idea. Falls over backwards are usually at the base of the skull because of the way they hit, and then it compresses at the base of the skull. Never saw a fracture in this location. Hard time imagining from a flip over backwards. Would likely not leave a laceration from a twitch. A kick, generally, yes. It was not a kick. He says it was not a kick. Can't imagine possible running into any object did this. Posture of the head is running. The posture of a horse when they're running, head is nose first. not the top of the head. This is when the defense attorney fence and the fence post filled with concrete. Couldn't this do it? Couldn't it? Blah, 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 blah. Difficult to imagine running the defense. Clinical signs found by Dr. Gould are consistent with brain trauma. Running into a fence is extremely unlikely caused this. If this happened in a paddock, horse would not have been able to walk without difficulty in the paddock. Terrible prognosis for survival, concussion, but much worse, and worse over time, impossible to treat successfully, immediately euthanized. Nature, in a way, explains all his lack of inability to balance or stand. Very thin slice, the skin, again, very thin skin, little muscle in that area. And because of the depressed fracture, even if there was swelling, it would have been hidden in the depressed fracture. They bring up the USTA records. And the reason they did this again is the prosecutor is trying to establish a value, because the value is what establishes the level of penalty and charge against him, to make that charge of over, I think it's 5,000. Because again, horses have no rights in New York State, and it has to be property, not a pet or an animal. If this had been a dog, totally different situation. USTA records, when he bought him, his last race, he came from Billy Damzik had him, Ralph Silvestri took him out off of him, and then Herman bought him for $6,500 off of Ralph Silvestri. Lifetime earnings $342,050. They established a value around $5,000. You'll see how later again that the defense attorney tries to devalue him by saying he had a bad hock. The man doesn't know anything about horses, so what he says is he makes some stupid comments, but that ruined him. He had no he had an infection in the hock, and then you'll see when I talk about it, when Herman talks. Cross-examination. Tries to discredit by saying Dr. assumed Bourgault used a shovel somewhere early on. And again, they go over the initial reports made to Cornell when they didn't know what was coming. A horse came with this, and everybody was just throwing ideas. Here's what happened. Here's what Katie found. And then they heard, there might be something happened to his head. This is what we're being told. This is why the horse was in the condition that he was found. And then they did ultimately find the fracture. And he mentions it could have been, I was told he was hit with a shovel. But what they're saying is that the defense was saying is that's prejudicial. You are already leading the investigators. Well, whenever someone makes a complaint, I was hit. A domestic violence complaint. Now he hit me with the telephone or whatever. It's the same thing. It's part of the investigation. He said he twisted what Herman swore in his initial deposition to his words, not his own. It turns out that he hands him a report and he says, "Did you say, Doctor, whatever, that the horse was hit with a shovel?" And then it says in the report, no, actually it says the owner, Herman Schwarzenstruber, in his deposition said that the horse was hit with a shovel. So he's putting words in his mouth. Typical. So, and again, he was trying to prove leading with assumption, even though the statement made was what Herman swore. And also in these in the probable cause, he didn't like that in the grand jury that this doctor used the word probable. Again, leading them. Well, that's their job, to just listen, and everyone has their opinion. That's what he was there for. Then he goes down to nobody knows how horses hurt themselves all the time road. As this is happening, and I found this out later, the female assistant defense attorney, the number 2, I guess is what they call him, who sat there, turns out she really has nothing to do with this case. Now, if you back up She's sitting there, and again, all the time she's just with a smile, laughing, smirk, just, we talk about unprofessional. I don't know if that's normal, but that's all she does. I found out later that no, she is not on this case. And if you remember a few days ago, I said that they didn't want Brianna testifying certain things when it comes to the next case where she was the 8 charges against him for assaulting her and abusing her and coercing her and manipulating her and striking her with a weapon and all that, right? That they didn't want that spoken to this because that could cause an issue that the next defense attorney would not hear. Well, she is the defense attorney for him in the upcoming trial against him for the domestic violence. Doesn't matter, but I mean, they make that case and literally she's sitting there at the defense table. Asks if he saw the horse in the paddock. Yes. Oh, saw the paddocks. I'm sorry. If he saw the paddocks, yes. Doctor says improbable, kicked in that location. Again, saying that he got kicked out there. Asks if horse could have head down licking. Listen to this. Well, maybe he had his head down licking his toes. The vet laughed. Again, never saw a fracture of this nature before. Again, repeats how horse's hoof would not create that injury, shape of the injury, and the type of injury from a kick. Does not fit. Foot could not create that fracture line. Drills him again about the chain of custody, the bleeding from the nose and the bleeder and, all that crap, if you've been paying attention. And skull fracture symptoms. Goes down the road about he was an untreated horse that bleeds. Tries to pin him that Fred, seeing horse in paddock, would indicate that it happened in the paddock. That he says he tries to say that he saw him earlier and the horse was wobbling and would have happened in the paddock. However, Fred never said his horse was wobbling in the paddock. And then later he did. Again, they're going over the old testimony. And this is all going to come out in the final arguments. Then suddenly it appears in the paddock wobbling on the report by Fred, who said it. It wasn't in the earlier ones. Makes case for twitch in the wash stall and why it was there. That to us, again, is a reach because any one of us could go into any barn and find a twitch in a wash stall. However, Brianna testifies that at the end of the day, she put the twitch away in their tack room and that she put the whip at the end of the barn where it always is so he could grab it when he goes out to jog and train. Tries to steer him that the twitch was preconceived notion. Doctor stands on twitch matches the injury. Asks could horse have been struck in the paddock could someone else have gone in paddock before Bourgault? Now he's trying to say, could someone else have gone in the paddock and hit the horse with an object? Accuses the doctor of leading pathologists with false info that horse was hit by an object, blinding those who examine the horse. Why do a report? Said metal never would. He said. Then the doctor says, I said shovel. Well, then he goes, well, isn't a shovel made of metal? He goes, well, the handles are made of wood. And if you want to go further, they're not always even made of wood. They could be fiberglass. Point again is he tried to say the doctor said metal when the doctor never said metal. He said a shovel. Defense again, no way to determine the actual how and when. He sends an email to Rob, Ron, and Andrew. They're the investigators and commissioners in New York State Gaming. Report from himself to them. Gives his opinion of the CT scan. That was on August 30th of 2023. The opinion consistent with downward blow Uh, the defense tries to say Bourgault is left. Oh, now that he did make a mistake, I should say made a mistake, but he pinned himself in a corner with this, that you have to explain it. He mentions that it was right-handed. And then this is where we dragged the prosecutor outside the courtroom during recess, and said, well, depending on where you're positioned around a horse, if you come over the horse like this, it's like this. But if you move over and you're left-handed, because Bourgault was left-handed, could he have hit him with his right hand? Sure. But the point is positioning and everything. And we went so far to say that normally when you're working on a horse, if he's in there and he's trying, it's left side. So it does make sense that it would be more apt to be on the left side. But the vet never should have stipulated he believed it was with a right hand, because just turn your body with an angle and hit the same way. And doctor on the stand says it doesn't matter right or left hand. In the redirect, they recall who was provided information as to who provided information to everybody about the horses again, and how he was acting in the paddock. Earlier in the day, horse was fine. And the only person who touched the horse was Bourgault, nobody else. How he got the case history originally from Dr. Demeter, and how she got it, the chain of information. The nosebleed came from the owner on the first report when he called it into Katie, and and spoke with interviews with the New York State Police, that he was told that it was about a nosebleed. And then reiterates that bleeding is common due to exercise. And then recross says, Bourgault was just a good guy who was trying to do a good deed. Next, witness, Herman Schwarzenschruber. I never met the guy. He's really Amish. And he was, a lot of times they had to go back and try to understand what he was saying, because he speaks with the Amish dialect and accent. Goes over his involvement in horses. He's only been training for 7 years. He's owned 10 horses, blah, 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 shoes horses. When finish line last race, tried to establish again his value. He planned to race him again. He was already jogging back. It was normal for him to be turned out all night. He was hot, is what he said, and then he would always jog better right out of the field the next morning and bring him in, jog him, and then kick him away until they turned him out for the rest of the night again. Puts his estimated value at $5,000. He shared the barn with Fred. Earlier in 2023, Fred was paid to care for the horses while Herman had a broken leg. He never gave permission after any of that was settled, and he was back for Fred to touch his horses or bring his horses in out of the field for any reason, no permission. Turns out that most of the testimony talks about how, you're all familiar with this, at a training center, limited amount of fields. Guy wants to turn his horses out. This guy's got his friggin' horse out there all day. Fuck this. I'm bringing him in and putting my horses out. That's the real story that we would understand. Horse was fine earlier in the day of death. Turned him out with the old horse Juicy and Shoot to Thrill. And when he left, the horses were just grazing, all acting as normal. He planned to leave them out all night, which he did regularly. Nothing different. Nothing. They did have two. Earlier they said that barn was only assigned one paddock. Turns out there were two. Got the call from Fred. Fred said finish line was wobbling in the paddock, bleeding, and cussing at him while he was on the phone. Was trying to hold him up in the wash stall, and he stepped on his foot. This is the phone call from Fred to Herman while he was at Yonkers. Herman wanted to call the vet. Fred said, too far gone, don't call her. Said Fred was cursing at him, and also shoot to thrill is no good either. He tells him that both his horses are just wastes and get rid of them. Now, my question there was, okay, well, if the horse was too far gone, unless he's going to die naturally, how did you intend on euthanizing him? So he called Katie Gould, did not give Fred permission to touch his horses at any time. They talk about and establish how the halter was changed, because later on we'll find out that Randy cut the halter off while the horse was down and choking or having trouble breathing. And to cut that halter off to get him loose and then put another halter on him. Not the same halter he was turned out with, which is confirmed by the halter when we see him in the ground. It was cut off and changed. Cross-examination. The defense says Fred was always good to Herman, loaned him money. And then Herman would pay him back by shoeing his horses. They worked together. Well, that's kind of, there's a barter back and forth. It's the same thing you would do if you were paying him, but says they shared the paddock. Ask Herman if Fred was right-handed or left-handed. Herman did verify that he's left-handed. So they even go into detail about he says, well, if he was cursing on the phone, how did you know he was cursing? Because he speaks French. He says, well, he also speaks English, and most of his cursing is in English. Says, even though Finish Line was coming back, he is a money pit. Vet cost me. Now, this is the defense attorney saying to him, yeah, but even though, he's just saying he was on his way back, he was costing you money. He was a money pit. A veterinarian costs money. Fred said horse appeared dead. And when he went down on the cross ties, he said on the phone to Herman that he just died. Fred encouraged him again not to call the vet. Disputes his real value monetarily. He lost his value because of his injuries, and he was not racing. In the redirect, Fred only person who ever saw the horse in the paddock. In the recross, they ask he talks about the whip and the twitch again. And that was the end of Herman. Now, this witness was very interesting. And he was straight, what you would expect from a horseman who's snappy and knows, and if you steered him, he would say, no, that's bullshit. This is the way we do it. So Randy Baxley, if you're out there, good job, dude. Never met you either, but really good job. He had the defense attorney he wanted to snap at him, but he realized it's not going to work with this guy. But he was. At first, he was very nervous. He doesn't work for Augie anymore. He worked for Augie for 6 years. He's been in the game, I believe he said 8. Verifies that the 2 tenants were in that barn. Says barn 4 had 2 paddocks, not 1. He said he last saw the horses in the paddock around 1, 2 o'clock. There were no issues. And then in passing, every time he went by, just, we're driving out. We know there's horses out there, know who's out there. But if there's not an immediate issue, it's out of sight, out of mind. Drove by it. So now here's where he hears what's going on. 5 o'clock, he drives by. He hears Fred screaming and cursing in barn. Hollering and cursing as he goes in that the horse stepped on his foot. He was 6 feet from the horse. Finish Line was on cross ties, hanging by 2 chains. He immediately cut the halter, and the horse was then loose and kind of lying down when he first saw him, until he cut him loose, I should say. Laying, trapped on the cross ties. Head in air and struggling to breathe. Fred doing nothing. He had his shoe off, and after he cut the horse loose, laid on the ground, and then he called Katie Gould. not Fred. Randy called Katie initially. He saw marks on his side and knew they were whip marks on the back right side. They actually had him a little diagram draw where the whip marks are above his stifle, like if you were three straight marks like this coming up from his stifle on his hindquarters. The horse was down, his ass was in the aisle, head inside on the cross ties in the wash stall, not turned around. He saw the whip on the floor and the twitch hanging on, and he showed which hook. They had the pictures on the, if you're looking in the stall, on the right side, right in front of the chain where there was a hook. He actually goes on to say that Fred's twitch is a little longer than the typical twitch. All right, doesn't mean, cut him loose, laid there for a few minutes. It was Randy who called Katie first. He then put another halter on him, which he later says must have been like his race halter because it was a really nice halter, paddock halter to go to the races. So he could get him into his stall. It was Randy who brought the horse into the stall. He says his feet weren't working too good. I posted this earlier. Got in the stall so Kate ran fluids. Fred was aggravated. He hit the horse inside the stall, punched him in the head hard multiple times. Stand up straight. Randy finally left disgusted. He wanted no part of it. That's it. Randy was done there. Later on, the horse is dead. He gets the call to dig the hole. Dug the hole and dried manure pile at an angle to make it deep, but needed to dig down like it was a ramp. He used the bobcat to dig the hole, not the excavator. So to get it deeper, he couldn't reach. He had to dig and keep going deeper, 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 coming out. And it was all dried manure that to make it deep, no rocks. This was a clean compost pile for fertilizer. So he drove in. They must have got him out of the stall. I don't know where it never specifies, anybody really specifies where they dropped him when they must have took him outside, I would imagine. You're not going to drop him in it. But whether it was in the barn, wherever, I guess it doesn't matter. They drove up with the bobcat, which has the bucket, and they did what everybody else does. You get in close, rolled him in, done. Brought him in, said, I lowered it. He slid out, done. Drove down the ramp he made, didn't drop him. He lowered the bucket, horse slid off, buried him with the same manure. There were no rocks in it. He says this was pure fertilizer, the manure pile. Digging the horse up. He says Holly guided him to avoid hitting the horse's head. Bucket never touched the horse himself. Holly held head all the way to the trailer. Head never touched anything. They laid him down, guiding head the whole time. Had the same halter on him that he put on after he cut the other halter off. Cross-examination. Defense attorney says, so sometime between 5:30, you heard commotion. Randy goes at him and says, was there a part of the... Oh, was he there for Katie later when she did the treatment? Randy goes at him about which the cross ties were. They said he said, the defense attorney tries to say, because they actually did a diagram later of the barn, 3 sets of cross ties in the aisle, 1 in the wash stall. So the question was, why didn't you turn him around? So you must be saying that the injury happened first. He says, no, when things like this are happening, you're not thinking about that. You just want to get, if you got an issue with a horse, you just want to get treated, get to the treatment, find out what's going on. You're not worried about turning around or whatever. This is where I'm going to interject my thought here. Or if a horse stepped on you, you throw him on cross ties because now you're in pain wherever you just happen to be. Because if everything is as we believe, nothing was wrong with the horse yet. It didn't happen until after he stepped on his foot. But then Randy cleverly says, well, if that's the case, he goes, well, wouldn't you try to get to him as quickly as possible? Then why didn't he put him, if he thought he was that much in pain or there was such an issue and couldn't walk and couldn't turn, why didn't he just put him on the first set of cross ties as he can't, in the aisle? Good call. That's what I mean. He was quick with the answers. He also makes it, he says, he stipulates multiple times that finish line was not sweating, where Bourgault says the horse was sweating profusely. And then they argue over the position of the horse again. This is Randy and Katie were actually who did most of the exam until Fred came in and intervened. And then he says, and he did the movie version of, and isn't it true that you're lying about him ever punching that horse? Because nobody ever says that. How come Katie Gould, the veterinarian, never said, even though she said he was aggravated, she never said he punched the horse? And then he says, well, she was in and out getting what she needed. She wasn't in there the whole time. As a vet would, go into her truck, getting what she needs, working around the horse, whatever. Defense says Fred was in pain, thus why he wasn't helping the horse. So the redirect asks him, when was the last time you saw the horse? And it was about 1.5 hours that he saw him in the field to dying. And that was it. People rest. Defense calls no witnesses. Closing arguments will be on 11 a.m. Monday. Same place, same bat channel. But so the feeling again after talking to the prosecutor afterwards is, he says, we got the message out there. He says, again, without a witness, you have to establish what's basically the most likely of causes and what matches, what doesn't. He's going to put together his final test, his closing argument. He wants to put some things on the projector again to reiterate and go over what, so the judge understands again, because there's no jury. The other guy will do his thing, and that's it. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen. The only good thing is, the feeling is, if he skates through on this, fine. And he gave up his opportunity early before this other trial came to light that he thought he was going to just beat all this. Now he's still looking at 7 more felony charges and another misdemeanor in regards to abusing Brianna on 4 separate dates. And those started, this happened in July of 2023 with the horse. The first alleged assault against her by him was in May, and it continued. And she documented it all, has people to corroborate that, and grand jury indicted him on all of it. So that's it. If he walks, at least we tried. Again, we know what happened. And hopefully, he never gets to touch another horse again. And the rest of his life is the rest of his life. He's got to live with it. Catch you all later.